No, we always like to go to the doctor, so. It only took me being out for 3 days before I finally said, okay, I'll go to the doctor and see what's going on. But like Pastor said, it is really good to be back and here this morning. Not being here, I was like, man, miss seeing my church family, and appreciate all the thoughts and prayers. And like I told Miss Betty this morning, said I just had a bad cold, and I was like, okay, it was a bad cold, but that was some good news. So we left off a couple Sundays ago at Samson, the birth of Samson, and his mom was barren, and Judges 14. And then when we looked at Judges 13, when, that was the child that they had, and that he was going to be a Nazarite. So when we got into chapter 14, and we look at Samson's life in the beginning, it says, and Samson went down to Timnath and saw a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. So when we talked about this briefly, he told his mom and dad, he said, I saw a woman of Timnath, and go get her for me to wife. Kind of like the way things happen nowadays. It's completely opposite. Our parents aren't involved, and keep it a secret until we're getting married, and then we let them know and spring it on them, and things like that. But in those days, the mom and dad would go down and make sure that this was the woman for their child. And of course, his mom and dad didn't, understand why he wanted to marry an uncircumcised Philistine. But what did Samson say? She pleaseth me well. He liked to look at her, probably her manner, probably talking. But his mom and dad didn't know that it was of the Lord, for the Lord sought an occasion against the Philistines. And as we're going to see here in chapter 14, the Philistines were over Israel at this time, and the Lord was going to use this situation with Samson's wife to, bring occasion to kind of, put the Philistines in their place a little bit. So when we look at this, and then we look in verse 5, there is a story that's a little bit familiar. It says, when Samson went down, and his father and his mother, to Timnath, and came to the vineyards of Timnath, and behold, a young lion roared against him. So a young lion was in the vineyard somewhere, and it came against Samson. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he rent him as he would have rent a kid. A kid is not a child. A kid is a goat, or some kind of animal that we're calling a kid. And he had nothing in his hand, but he told not his father or his mother what he had done. And he went down and talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. So those couple verses there, it's like, well, there's, he killed a lion. He did. But he didn't tell his mom and dad. His mom and dad were with him, but there was enough space between them that Samson was kind of walking by himself, and all of a sudden this lion came up and attacked him and roared against him. And when it said he had nothing in his hand is significant, because he basically tore the lion in half and rent him as he would just a goat or some kind of small animal at that point in time. So I think I've told you before that I went to Bob Miller's over here right across the Maryland line, which does a lot of taxidermy, exotic animals. If you ever want to go see his museum, he would love to have you. You can walk through it and see the animals, and it's really interesting. But lions stand about this high is where their back is. Okay? This is where their back is. They're about the size of a good-sized cow or a bull that we have around here. So when these young lions, and you think that Samson just ripped a lion, it wasn't a kitty cat, or it wasn't something small. It's about like this. Even a young lion, because he's got young lions over there and old lions. He's got the elephants with the tusks, so if you're not into all that ivory and elephant stuff, don't go. But, if you want to go see some pretty cool animals, he has them. But when the verse says he had nothing in his hand, and he tore that lion in two, to me, Samson's a big man already, because, you got to have some arms to be able to rip that animal in half, and to rip him, and then he just left the animal lay there. And his mom and dad didn't know nothing about it. I find it interesting, just from being a meat guy, that what happened to all the blood that he got on him? What happened to ripping that animal in half and everything, the hair and the fur and everything else that his mom and dad would be saying, what happened to you? What happened? Man, you're a mess. But he ripped the animal in two, and nothing was in his hand. There's no filler verses in the Bible. There's no filler sentences. And when it says he had nothing in his hand, I think that just shows the Spirit of the Lord came on him, and just the strength that he had to rip that animal completely in half is just amazing to me. Just, one of those things that, when the Bible says stuff and we look at it, it's, the Spirit of the Lord came on him. And what's impossible for the Spirit of the Lord? Nothing. He used Samson to, tear a lion in half. And he didn't tell his mom and dad what he'd done. So then he goes down, he talks to the woman, and she pleased Samson well. Once again, there's another little verse that, part of a verse that we need to make sure we look at for future, for what happens to Samson down the road. But she pleased Samson well. Kind of gives you the mindset of Samson that, he's looking at that, physical part. He's looking at that, oh wow, she appeals to me with her looks and things like that. And did we really dig into the relationship with this Philistine lady? And maybe not. But she pleased Samson well. If you look in verse 8, and after a time he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. So I just thought about this, Lloyd. This is going to be a question for you. How long does it take bees to build a hive and produce honey? A few days. So if they got in there and built a honeycomb and everything, they could do that in a couple days. So when they're looking at this carcass of this lion, the thing that I researched on this a little bit was that the carcass could have decomposed over time, and the Bible says after a time he returned. So there's not really a specific thing of like, okay, he returned in a couple days or months or when it was, but it was enough time for the bees to go in there and make a honeycomb and start producing honey that could be eaten. And I know a lot of people, they take that honeycomb and they would rather have that than the honey, because the honeycomb has that wax stuff that you can eat. It's edible. Right, Lloyd? Yes. So make sure I'm correct, but I know my brother-in-law, he likes the honeycomb more than he likes the honey. Me, it don't matter to me. I like the honeycomb and the honey, but it's very good. So when he has had the swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion, he took thereof in his hands, in verse 9, and went on eating, and came to his father and mother, and he gave them, and they did eat, but he told them not that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. In Leviticus, it's pretty clear that the Bible says that God doesn't want them touching dead animals and things like that. So there was some speculation on, was it just a skeleton of the lion? Did it decompose that bad? Had that much time passed? Don't know. The Bible doesn't say. But he didn't tell his mom and dad that, hey, I got this out of that carcass of the lion. Even if it was a skeleton. He didn't tell them. He just brought them the honey and said, here you go. Found some honey for you. So when he went down in verse 10, his father went down unto the woman, and Samson made there a feast, for so used the young men to do. So his dad and him went down, and they made a feast for this potential bride for Samson. And it came to pass, when they saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. So now Samson and his dad was coming down, and now they bring 30 people to be with Samson to kind of make him feel comfortable. Let's let him kind of get to know you, get to know our friends, some of our customs, things like that. So they brought 30 people to be with him. And Samson said unto them, in verse 12, I will put forth a riddle unto you, if ye can certainly declare it me within the 7 days of the feast, and find it out, then I will give you 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments. Those 30 sheets are like shirts or coverings or whatever they had back then that he was going to give to them. And then he was also going to give them 30 changes of garments. So what happened is, when these 30 people came out, it was 30 companions, 30 men that, we want to get to know each other. If you've ever had a group of guys get together, and I mean, I've never done this myself, but, Mom's not here to correct me. But, if you get guys together, what do they do when they're younger? Wrestle? We did that. What else? Eat. Yep, boys can eat. I mean, we're talking young men here, probably in their 20s. The Bible doesn't say, but probably in that age range, I would think. Discuss. They talk. Do they ever battle each other just to see who's stronger and who's faster and who's, maybe got a little bit more. They, from what I researched about the riddle, when they had these kind of feasts and things, it was customary for them to show their wit and just to show how clever they were. So I'm going to trick you. I'm going to give you a riddle you can't figure out. Does anybody have a good riddle they want to share? I have one. John will like it. And this is just a riddle. Not a joke, but a riddle. So a riddle would be something like this. There was a warden of a prison, and he had 3 prisoners. He said, I have 5 hats. You heard this one, John? John's laughing. He said, I got 3 red hats and 2 white hats. He said, I'm going to put a hat on each one of your heads, and if you can tell me what color hat you have on your head and how you know that, I'll let you go free. So the first 2 guys could see, and they could see each other's hats, but they couldn't see their own hat. The third guy was blind. So he asked the first guy, he said, you know what color hat you have on your head? He goes, no. He asked the second guy, he said, you know what color hat you have on your head? He said, no. He asked the third guy, he said, well, you're blind, you can't see. And he goes, well, I know what color hat I have on my head. How did he know and why? That'd be a riddle. That's one that you're going to go home and write down like, all right, 3 red hats, 2 white hats. The third guy was blind. It's a math puzzle, but it's also a riddle. You got to figure it out. How did he know that? So when Samson puts forth this riddle, it was to show that, he was clever. And when the guys get together and they talk and they fight and they wrestle and do all these things, part of their festivities back during these feasts and things, the bride or the groom would come up with these riddles for people just to show his cleverness and his thought process. And his riddle was, if you can certainly declare it within the 7 days of the feast and find it out, I'll give you 30 sheets and 30 garments. But if you cannot declare it, then you'll give me 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments. And they said unto him, put forth thy riddle that we may hear it. And he said unto them, out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. And they could not in 3 days expound the riddle. So for 3 days they're scratching their heads, and they couldn't think about it. But of course they did not know that Samson had killed the lion. They didn't know that the bees had built a nest in there, and he took that sweet food from the carcass. They had no idea what his riddle was. And in verse 15, and it came to pass on the 7th day that they said unto Samson's wife, entice thy husband that he may declare unto us the riddle, lest we burn thee and thy father's house with fire. Have ye called us to take that we have? Is it not so? I mean, this is serious. This riddle thing wasn't just for them to guess it or figure out the color of the hat on the guys' heads. This is, no, we're going to burn your house down and your father's house because we want to know the riddle. He's kind of mocking us. We can't figure it out. So they go to Samson's wife and tell her that, you got to help us out. And look what happened in verse 16. And Samson's wife wept before him and said, thou dost but hate me and lovest me not. Thou put forth a riddle unto the children of my people, and hast not told it to me. And he said unto her, behold, I have not told it to my father nor my mother, and shall I tell it thee? I haven't even told my mom and dad. You want me to tell the riddle to you? You want me to share this with you because these people who were the Philistines, and she was a Philistine, went to her and tried to get her to tell them what the riddle was. But she didn't know. She had no idea. So her job now, because the Philistines are pressuring her, was to go get Samson to tell her what the riddle was. And of course, her first try at this, I haven't even told my mom and dad. Why am I going to tell you? His first reaction was the right one. His first reaction was the strong one. I haven't told it to my mom and dad. I'm not going to tell you either. And what happened in verse 16? And Samson's wife wept before him and said, thou dost but hate me and lovest me not. Thou hast put forth a riddle unto the children of my people, and hast not told it to me. And he said unto her, I have not told it my father nor mother, and shall I tell thee? And she wept before him the 7 days while their feast lasted. And it came to pass on the 7th day that he told her, because she lay sore upon him, and she told the riddle to the children of her people. So I will tell you this, that the first time that I ever had a lady cry on me for something that they didn't do work-wise when I was a boss, man, I didn't know how to handle it. I was just like, wow, man, she's crying. You know, it just tore me up because I didn't know what to do. And I actually had to go figure it out because, she was wrong in something she did, but she was crying. Samson, he just, when his wife started crying, he just didn't know what to do. Well, I guess I got to tell you the riddle because I can't handle this crying stuff. And it is. It does affect you. I remember that. I remember that distinctly. I didn't yell at anybody. I didn't, talk mean to him or nothing. It was just, something that, she did wrong. And all of a sudden, here comes the tears. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I was wrong. Sorry, I'll do it myself. Don't worry about it, That wasn't the right answer. But Samson here kind of reminded me of that his wife started, whining and crying and, I need to know. But did she really want to know? No, she didn't. She was being pressured by outside influences to get him to betray that trust of just husband and wife because she wanted to go tell the people that were her people that weren't part of the nation of Israel. She was a Philistine, and she was going to tell the other Philistines. That way, these men that were supposedly friendly with Samson could get this information to use against him. You say, well, that's kind of simple, but back then, that meant something. That meant something that now I can't trust you. You ever have somebody you tell something to or somebody betrays your trust? How hard is it for you to trust them again? I mean, if somebody betrays your trust, even just a little bit, do you trust them anymore? Do you trust them that they're going to do what they say? It's tough. I mean, it's very hard. These guys are married. This is his wife. And she's going to just, completely lay on him. It also shows, like Samson in the beginning, like what his weakness was. So if somebody sees a weakness in us as a Christian, what happens? What happens to the devil when he finds a weakness in us? And he attacks it. Attacks it. Everybody can have different weaknesses, right? But once the devil finds your weakness, just rest assured until you surrender that to the Lord, until you get that straightened out with the Lord and you have the strength to fight the devil, he's just going to keep on bringing it, no matter what it is. It can be something simple, it can be something complicated, it can be a lot of things. But if the devil finds it out, and I'm not saying that she was the devil, but if the devil finds it out, he's just going to take advantage of that. And in verse 18, and the men of the city said unto him on the seventh day, before the sun went down, what is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion? And he said unto them, if ye had not plowed with my heifer, ye had not found out my riddle. Now, I don't know about you, but I know that if I called Dana a heifer, I would not have any hot meals for the next couple months or years or whatever. But when he said, ye have plowed with my heifer, I had to really look that up and try to find out what that meant, because I didn't think it meant what it said, and I'm glad I looked it up because it actually didn't. What he was saying is that, if you have a heifer and they plow in the same fields and they plow in a certain direction, they're going to plow the same way all the time. They're going to go this way, and they know to go that way. I'm not old enough, I don't know anybody really that actually used the heifers and the oxen and the things like that to plow with. But I know some of the folks I used to talk to, they said that once you get them going, they know where to go. They know how to plow the fields. They know which fields they're going to plow. So when he's talking about this is the way he wanted his wife to go, but they caused her to go in a different direction. That's what this saying was, you plowed with my heifer. You got her to go somewhere else that she was not supposed to go. And then you're the one that did this. So when Samson found this out, we come to verse 19 and verse 20, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon, and he slew 30 men of them, and took their spoil, and gave change of garments unto them which expounded the riddle, and his anger was kindled, and he went up to his father's house. So his anger was kindled against them, and he slew 30 of them. And if you look back at verse 11, that's how many people that were supposed to be his companions. He slew all the 30 people that were supposed to be his companions. That wasn't the number of people that was at the feast. That was just the 30 men that were supposed to be his friends. Here, Samson, here's your friends. Here's the people that we brought out to talk to you, to kind of get to know you, to have these conversations, to have these, feats of strength and, run and wrestle and carry on. And these are supposed to be your friends. And he spent 7 days with them. But when they betrayed him and they betrayed his trust, and then they got his wife to do the same, his anger was kindled. And when he went down and he slew all 30 of them, he took their spoil and he gave it to the other people that expounded on the riddle. And in verse 20, but when Samson's wife was given to his companion, whom he had used as his friend. So Samson's wife was no longer going to be his wife, but was given to his best man, his best friend, the person that was with him the entire time. And if we look at that and we say, well, that's kind of, something that happened in the Old Testament that Samson, one of the New Testament, stories that we looked at was also true when the Apostle Paul had Simon the sorcerer. And if you look at Simon, what did Simon do once he got saved? Because he did get saved, but what did he do? Hey, if you show me how to have that power of the Holy Spirit without really having it, I'll give you money for it. Trying to manipulate it, trying to twist it around to their own benefit. And that's what these guys did. They turned it around to their own benefit, and Samson slew them. So we look at chapter 15, it said, it came to pass within a while after in the time of wheat harvest, that Samson visited his wife with a kid, and he said, I will go into my wife into the chamber, but her father would not suffer him to go in. And her father said, I verily thought that thou hast utterly hated her, therefore I gave her to thy companion. Is not her younger sister fairer than she? Take her, I pray thee, instead of her. So when Samson went back to his wife, the wife's dad said, well, I thought you didn't want her no more. I thought you hated her. So I gave her to the companion. I gave her to your best man. And besides that, isn't her sister better looking than she is? I mean, wow. I mean, what kind of father-in-law do you have there? I mean, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, well, she's better looking than her anyway. You should take her. I mean, I don't know what to say on that, but Samson was not having it. And if we look at verse 3 in chapter 15, it said, and Samson said concerning them, now shall I be more blameless than the Philistines, though I do them a displeasure. Listen to verse 4 of chapter 15. And Samson went and caught 300 foxes, and took firebrands, and turned tail to tail, and put a firebrand in the midst between the two tails. And when he had set the brands on fire, he let them go into the standing corn of the Philistines, and burn up both the shocks and also the standing corn with the vineyards and the olives. So verse 4 talks about him catching 300 foxes. Anybody ever tried to catch a fox? No? So when I was younger, I tried to, and I thought I was pretty fast, and I couldn't catch it. Good thing I didn't, because if I would have, foxes are pretty vicious. Because I did try to get one out of a trap once that was in a paw trap, and I didn't realize that the trapper was actually trying to catch the fox. I thought he just accidentally got in this paw trap. And when I put a board up to the fox's head, like a nice 2x4 board, the teeth marks that he put in that thing, he would have shredded my hand if I would have got close to him to that paw trap. And my first thought was that I'm just going to go up because the fox was laying there right by the trap, and I had been hunting, and I saw him. And I thought, well, when I get done hunting, I'll just, go let him loose because he accidentally got in this trap. And I didn't know that Wayne was trapping him. Found out later that Wayne was trapping him, for the hide. But when I took that board and I went to put it so I could get, he just gnawed that board almost in half. So yeah, when I read this and I see that he caught 300 foxes, wow. And then he put a torch between them and let them go. And if you've ever seen a fox, they just don't go here and there. They will all over the place. They're not going straight to wherever their den is. They're going all over the place, especially if they're tail to tail. How can you tie them tail to tail and put a firebrand in the midst? That just tells you what kind of man that Samson was. He's catching 300 foxes, and he tied their tails together, and he put a firebrand between them. Okay. I'm not messing with Samson, but I cannot wait to meet Samson one day. But it says when they burnt up the corn and they had no standing corn, the vineyards and the olives, these foxes did some damage to this whole area of the Philistines. What was the corn used for? Or what was the corn going to be used for? That was their food. That was all their food going into the non-harvest months. And what did Samson and the foxes do? He just destroyed it all. Same thing with the olives and the vineyards. That was their food sources. You got to remember, they didn't have stores. They didn't have things that were going to go along and be able to supplement all this stuff being missing. And in verse 6, then the Philistines said, "Who had done this?" And they answered, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he had taken his wife and giving her to his companion. And the Philistines came up and burnt her and her father with fire." So if we look in chapter 14 and verse 15, what did they threaten to do to her if she didn't tell them the riddle? "We're going to burn your house and your father's house with fire if you don't tell us the riddle." And what happened after Samson let these foxes go on the Philistines' food sources? They burnt her and her father with fire. So what did she gain out of betraying Samson's trust and ending up with Samson's companion? Nothing. I think this is just a perfect example of what happens when the devil dangles those carrots in front of you. He says, "Here, look at what I got over here." Yeah, don't worry. Genesis, what does he say? "You will not surely die." And what happens down the road? We know the curse, that Adam and Eve, had to deal with after that. If we look at that, and her father and her got burned up anyway. I think it's just a perfect example of, be sure your sin will find you out. If you're looking at this and say, well, they had to tell them the riddle because it was her people, and in the end, just a few verses later, her and her father were burned anyhow. And in verse 7, and Samson said unto them, "Though ye have done this, yet will I be avenged of you, and after that I will cease." And he smote them hip and thigh with a great slaughter, and he went down and dwelt in the top of the rock Edom. Then the Philistines went up and pitched in Judah and spread themselves in Lehi. And the men of Judah said, "Why are you come up against us?" And they answered, "To bind Samson are we come up to do to him as he hath done to us." We're going to bind Samson. He's the one that did this to us, so we're going to get him and we're going to bind him. Then 3,000 men of Judah went to the top of the rock Edom and said to Samson, "Knowest thou not that the Philistines are rulers over us? What is this that thou hast done to us?" And he said unto them, "As they did unto me, so I have done to them." And they said unto him, "We are come down to bind thee, that we may deliver thee into the hands of the Philistines." And Samson said unto them, "Swear unto me that ye will not fall upon me yourselves." And they spake unto him, saying, "No, but we will bind thee fast and deliver thee into their hand. But surely we will not kill thee." And they bound him with 2 new cords, and brought him up from the rock. So we all know what the story is of Samson, and we all know that when the Spirit of the Lord was with Samson, that these new cords were just not going to matter. But the men of Judah said, "The Philistines they're the rulers over us. What have you done unto us? They rule over us, and you did this, you let them foxes go and destroyed their food and everything, and now they want to come and they just want us to bind you up and bring you to them." That was a deal that we had made. Kind of reminds me of what happened in World War II when the Germans, used some of the Jewish folks to betray the other Jewish folks. Tell me where they're hiding. Is that me? Something? Sorry. Don't know. I'll try to be still. But they would betray those other folks, and they would say, "Yeah, we'll tell you where they're hiding. We'll tell you where their secret place is. We'll tell you how they're getting out." And they kept betraying each other. And these men of Judah betrayed Samson. And it says in verse 14, "And when he came unto Lehi, the Philistines shouted against him, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and the cords that were upon his arms became as flax that was burnt with fire, and his bands loosed from off his hands. And he found a new jawbone of an ass, and put forth his hand, and took it, and slew 1,000 men therewith. And Samson said, with the jawbone of an ass, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of an ass, I have slain 1,000 men. And as we've seen before in the stories of the judges, I'm going to turn this off. Sorry about that. But in the story of the judges, and as we're looking, and we say, okay, so Samson went ahead and he slew 1,000 people by himself. It doesn't say Samson and his army, it just says Samson slew 1,000 men. So when he slew those 1,000 men by himself with the jawbone of an ass, a jawbone of an ass is not a major weapon. I was going to bring a jawbone today, and I just forgot. I'll probably have it here next week. But it's curved, and it has a nice handle on it. And it's curved, and sometimes it has the teeth in it, sometimes it doesn't. But all you're doing is you're just wielding this jawbone. And it has a nice handle on it. It's able to be carried in a way that, you could use it as a weapon. But he tore a lion in half when the Spirit of the Lord was upon him. He used a jawbone to kill 1,000 people. And next time you're somewhere and there's 1,000 people present, you just think about that number of 1,000 men that he's fighting and how that must have been for him to be swinging this jawbone around, just utterly going through people one at a time. And when you see the jawbone, when I bring it in, you'll be like, that's really what he was using? Because a large deer is going to be about the size of this jawbone. And when you see the handle on it, it is kind of pretty cool, because I did have one in my hand, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to put it in a nice vac seal bag and bring it in so everybody could kind of see it. But when you see it and you think about the Spirit of the Lord being with Samson and allowing him this great victory over the Philistines, it just goes back to, we have the Spirit of the Lord living inside of us. There is nothing that we have going on that is too big for the Lord. Nothing. These guys are going up against mighty armies, mighty men, all these things and all these challenges that they have to do. And as long as the Spirit of the Lord is with us, we're going to be fine. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you so much for this day. Thank you for allowing the privilege to be here this morning. Lord, I just pray that you would just bless the message coming up in a few minutes here from Pastor. And if there be one person here that's not saved, that today would be the day. And I just ask all these things in Jesus'